A simple favor that changed everything. It was just an ordinary Tuesday afternoon when I first met Sarah. The kind of day where nothing in particular stands out, and everything seems to fall into its usual routine. The sun hung lazily in the sky, casting a warm glow over the apartment complex where I had recently moved. Life was gradually settling into its predictable pattern, and I was beginning to feel more at home in my new apartment. Having relocated to the city for a fresh job opportunity, I wasn't exactly unfamiliar with the sensation of being in a new place. However, the adjustment to living alone was still a bit of a challenge. The building I lived in was modest, nothing extravagant, but it had a cozy, lived-in vibe. The neighbors, though friendly, were a bit distant. Most interactions were quick hellos or short greetings in the elevator. But I had seen Sarah before. She was my neighbor in the unit just a few doors down, someone who always seemed to be rushing somewhere, her head down as she passed by in the hallway. In those first few weeks, I'd hardly exchanged more than a smile with her, but I always felt she had an air about her, something warm and welcoming, like she carried a spark that was just waiting to ignite. It wasn't until I received a package addressed to her that everything began to change. The delivery man had left it at the entrance of the building, and as soon as I saw her name on the label, I knew it belonged to her. It wasn't that I had been expecting anything for myself. I had no plans that afternoon. So I thought, why not drop it off? It didn't seem like a big deal, just another neighborly gesture. But little did I know, this simple act would open a door to something much deeper than I ever expected. I set the package in my car and drove over to Sarah's apartment, feeling slightly awkward, as though I were intruding on her space, but also excited for no real reason. When I reached her door and knocked, the moment she opened it, I immediately noticed the smile on her face. There was something different about the way she greeted me. It wasn't the usual quick thank you and close the door kind of interaction. No, this felt warmer, more genuine. "Oh, you didn't have to bring it up here," she said, stepping back to allow me inside. I was just about to go pick it up from the lobby. "It's no trouble," I replied, surprised by her invitation to step in. I was already headed this way, and I figured I might as well bring it up. The door opened wider, and I found myself standing in her doorway, uncertain of what to do next. In all our past brief encounters, I had never stepped inside her apartment, and yet here I was, being welcomed in as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "Are you sure?" she asked, her eyes catching mine in a way that made my heart flutter. I was just about to make some coffee. "Would you like to join me?" I stood there for a second, my brain working to process what was happening. I hadn't expected this. I didn't know Sarah well enough to just invite myself in, and I certainly wasn't one to make a habit of accepting coffee offers from people I barely knew. But there was something about the way she looked at me, so open and sincere, that made me feel at ease in a way I hadn't anticipated. I had nothing better to do, and there was a part of me that was curious to know her better, so I found myself nodding in agreement. "Sure, I'd love to." She smiled, and I could feel something shift in the air. It wasn't just a friendly gesture. She didn't seem like someone who invited random neighbors in for coffee. It was almost as though she had been waiting for the right moment to. That thought made my chest tighten, but I didn't want to overthink it. I followed her inside, where the warmth of the apartment immediately enveloped me. The space was smaller than mine but more thoughtfully arranged. There were soft, warm lights casting a gentle glow over the room, and the scent of freshly brewed coffee wafted in from the kitchen. Plants were scattered around, adding a touch of life to the space, and the overall feel was calm and inviting. She led me to the kitchen, where she began grinding coffee beans with practiced ease. As she moved around the space, her energy felt effortless, and I couldn't help but watch her in silence for a moment. There was a grace in the way she carried herself, something easy about her movements that made it clear she felt completely at home in her own skin. "I'm sorry, I wasn't expecting company," she said, glancing over her shoulder with a smile. "But thank you for bringing the package. You're a lifesaver. It's been such a crazy week." I laughed softly, suddenly feeling more relaxed than I expected. Tell me about it. I haven't caught a break either. Work's been a little relentless, if I'm being honest. Sarah's smile widened, and she turned to pour the freshly brewed coffee into 2 mugs. I can imagine. So, how are you liking the new job so far? She asked as she handed me a cup. I took the mug in my hands, feeling the warmth seep into my skin. It's good, but there's a lot to figure out. Every day feels like a new challenge, and I'm just trying to keep up. I shrugged, unsure of what to add next, but somehow the words just kept flowing. The conversation felt easy with her, and I found myself sharing more than I usually would with someone I barely knew. So, what do you do when you're not working? She asked, as she settled down on the couch across from me, her legs tucked under her. The way she looked at me as if she was genuinely interested in my life made me feel oddly seen, like I wasn't just a random neighbor she had to make small talk with. I guess I do a lot of reading, I said. It helps me escape for a bit. Sometimes I go out for walks in the city or find a quiet cafe to read in. I'm still figuring out what the best spots are around here. That sounds nice, Sarah said with a thoughtful expression. And for a moment, I thought I caught a glimpse of something deeper behind her eyes. It wasn't just politeness. She seemed to be genuinely curious, taking an interest in what I said. Maybe we should go for a walk sometime, explore a new spot together. I couldn't quite understand it, but the invitation caught me off guard. A casual walk, sure, but it felt more than just a friendly gesture. There was an unspoken invitation in her words, a subtle suggestion that this wasn't just a neighborly coffee anymore. As she continued talking, I found myself drawn to her energy, to the way she effortlessly filled the room with warmth. It wasn't just her beauty that captivated me. It was the way she made me feel seen, understood, and valued in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. As the evening wore on, the conversation shifted to lighter topics. We talked about our favorite books, the best places to eat in the city, and what we each hoped to do on the weekends. The easy rhythm of our conversation made me feel more at home in her space, but there was still a tension lingering in the air, something unspoken that neither of us addressed. There was a connection between us, something more than just a passing friendly chat, but what exactly it was, neither of us could define just yet. Eventually, I realized how late it had gotten. The clock on the wall showed it was past 9:00 p.m., and as much as I wanted to stay, I knew I should head back home. I stood up to leave, but before I could make it to the door, Sarah spoke up. "You know," she began, her voice soft, "I'm really glad we did this. I haven't had a chance to really talk to someone in a while. You're easy to talk to, and I appreciate you coming over." Her words made my chest tighten, and I hesitated for a moment. Was this just a one-time thing, or was there more to it? "I had a great time too," I replied, offering a smile that felt genuine. "Thanks for the coffee. I'd love to do this again sometime." There it was, those words, a simple invitation to meet again. But in that moment, I realized that it wasn't just about the coffee or the package. Something had shifted between us, and I wasn't sure where it would lead, but I knew it wouldn't be the same as before. This was the start of something new, and as I stepped out of her apartment that night, I couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation rise within me. Something about Sarah had sparked something within me, and I had a feeling this was only the beginning. The unexpected connection. The days following my coffee with Sarah seemed to move in slow motion. I'd never realized how much the little moments, like a casual coffee or a simple chat with a neighbor, could hold so much weight. That night, after leaving her apartment, I kept replaying every word she'd said, every glance she'd given, as though it held some kind of hidden meaning. There was a warmth to Sarah, something that felt real, and it was clear she wasn't just being polite. I had sensed a kind of unspoken connection between us, something deeper than mere neighborly kindness. I had always been a solitary person. I wasn't accustomed to forming close relationships quickly, especially not with someone I'd barely known. It wasn't like I had trouble talking to people, but I usually kept my distance, preferring the safety of my own space over the complexities of deeper connections. But with Sarah, it felt different. The way she listened when I spoke, how she seemed to genuinely care about the things I said. There was something about it that made me feel like I wasn't just another person passing through her life. I felt important, like I mattered in a way I hadn't in a long time. The next day, I found myself caught in the whirlwind of thoughts and emotions I hadn't expected. I couldn't stop thinking about her. It wasn't just the way she looked or how easy it was to talk to her. It was how much she made me feel seen, like there was more to me than just the usual tired routine. I hadn't even realized how much I'd been missing that kind of connection until I was in her apartment, sharing that cup of coffee with her, feeling a sense of ease I hadn't known I was capable of. But now, a new question lingered in my mind. What did all of this mean? Was it just a friendly gesture, or was there something more to it? I wasn't sure if she saw it the way I did. Maybe she was just being nice, or maybe there was something else there, something that neither of us had fully acknowledged yet. It was hard to tell, especially considering how quickly things had escalated from a simple neighborly favor to an evening spent talking about life, sharing laughs, and enjoying each other's company. I spent the next few days trying to get back to my routine. I threw myself into work, hoping that I could distract myself from the ever-growing curiosity about Sarah. But no matter what I did, I kept finding my thoughts drifting back to her. What was it about her that made me feel so comfortable? Why did I want to spend more time with her? And most importantly, was she feeling the same way? It was on a Thursday afternoon when I received a text from Sarah that made my heart skip a beat. "Hey, I was wondering if you're free tonight. I'm making dinner and thought it'd be nice to hang out again. Maybe watch a movie or just chill." I stared at the message for a moment, feeling a rush of excitement course through me. Dinner. This was more than just a coffee. It wasn't a casual invite this time. It felt more intimate, like she wanted to spend real time with me. But I also felt a twinge of anxiety. Was this just her being friendly, or was she really interested in getting to know me better? I quickly typed back, my fingers trembling slightly. "I'd love to. What time should I come by?" Her response was almost immediate. "How about 7? I'll text you the details later." I couldn't help but grin as I read the message. My heart was pounding in my chest, and for the first time in a long time, I felt that sense of excitement bubbling up inside me. I was going to see Sarah again. But this time, it was different. It wasn't just a casual meetup. There was something more, something that had been building ever since that first coffee. But what would happen next? I couldn't quite figure it out, but I knew I was ready to find out. The hours leading up to 7 p.m. felt like they dragged on forever. I tried to focus on work, but my mind kept wandering. What was I going to wear? What would we talk about? Would this change things between us? By the time I was ready, I felt a mixture of anticipation and nerves. I'd never been great at navigating the early stages of a relationship, and this, whatever it was between us, felt like it could be something important. But I also didn't want to rush things, didn't want to jump into something that might not be as meaningful as I hoped. When I arrived at Sarah's apartment, my stomach was a bundle of nerves. I knocked on the door, taking a deep breath before she opened it. There she was, looking effortlessly beautiful in a soft, cozy sweater and jeans. Her hair was loose, framing her face perfectly. And there was that familiar sparkle in her eyes that made my heart race. It wasn't just the way she looked. It was the way she made me feel. "Hey, come on in," she greeted me, her voice warm and inviting. "Dinner's almost ready. I hope you're hungry." I smiled, relieved to see her so relaxed, and stepped inside. The apartment felt even more cozy tonight, the scent of something delicious wafting from the kitchen. I took in the small details, how the candles were lit on the dining table, the soft lighting that made everything feel intimate and welcoming. It was clear that she put in some effort, and I couldn't help but feel touched by that. "I didn't realize we were having a fancy dinner," I joked, trying to keep the mood light. "I should have brought a gift or something." She laughed, shaking her head. "Don't be silly," she replied, waving her hand dismissively. "I just wanted to do something nice. I like cooking when I get the chance." We sat down at the table, and as she served the food, I found myself watching her, fascinated by how natural and confident she seemed in her own space. There was a calmness to her that made everything feel easier, more relaxed, and I couldn't deny how drawn I was to her. As we ate, we talked about our jobs, our hobbies, and our favorite places to eat in the city. The conversation flowed so easily, and I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt so comfortable with someone. But even as we talked, I could sense a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The lighthearted banter was slowly being replaced by something deeper, more meaningful. There was a quiet understanding between us, a recognition that we were no longer just two neighbors talking about small things. We were connecting on a different level, one that felt more significant. At one point, Sarah put down her fork and looked at me thoughtfully. "You know, I don't think I've ever had such a nice dinner with a neighbor before," she said, her voice soft. "It's kind of surprising how easy this has been. I think we're going to get along really well." Her words struck a chord with me. It wasn't just the flattery or the compliment. It was the way she said it, as though she was acknowledging that this was more than just a casual hangout. She seemed to be saying that we had something worth exploring, but I wasn't sure if I was reading too much into it. "I feel the same way," I replied, my voice steady even though my heart was pounding. "It's been really nice getting to know you. I didn't expect this, honestly, but I'm glad it's happening." The tension between us grew as the night wore on, a quiet current beneath the surface. Every time our eyes met, I could feel it, an undeniable spark that neither of us had fully acknowledged yet, but there was no denying it. Something was changing between us. By the time we finished dinner and moved on to dessert, I could feel the walls between us crumbling, bit by bit. The easy conversation, the shared laughter, it felt like we were building something, though neither of us was ready to put a name to it yet. After dessert, we went out onto the balcony, the city lights stretching out below us like a blanket of stars. The cool air was refreshing against my skin, and for a moment, we stood there in comfortable silence, just enjoying each other's company. I wasn't sure where things were headed, but I knew I wanted to keep exploring this connection with her. Sarah spoke first, her voice soft in the stillness of the night. "I've really enjoyed getting to know you," she said, her words almost a whisper. "I feel like we've known each other for so much longer than we actually have." I turned to look at her, my heart racing as I realized what she was saying. She wasn't just talking about being neighbors. There was something more in her words, something unspoken that we both knew was there. "I think I feel the same way," I said, my voice steady despite the uncertainty swirling inside me. "It's not every day you connect with someone like this." We stood there for a few more minutes, the world around us fading away, leaving just the two of us in that quiet moment. It was simple, but it felt significant. I didn't know what would happen next, but for the first time in a long time, I was excited to find out. The awkward dance of unspoken feelings. The days following that quiet night on Sarah's balcony felt like they existed in a liminal space, neither fully one thing nor another. After dinner, after the coffee, after those long conversations, we seemed to have crossed some invisible threshold. I wasn't sure what we were, but it was clear that what we had wasn't just the simple neighborly exchange I had originally thought it would be. There was a growing undercurrent between us, a current neither of us seemed ready to acknowledge fully, but one that we couldn't ignore. The awkwardness that often comes with the beginning of something new was still there, lingering just beneath the surface. Every time I saw Sarah in the hallway, I couldn't help but notice how we both fell into an easy routine of smiles and casual greetings, but there was more to it now. There was a shift in how we looked at each other, a change in our interactions that made everything feel charged, electric in a way that hadn't existed before. But there was also an undeniable tension that made me unsure of how to act. I had never been good with feelings, never been able to navigate the murky waters of early relationships without second-guessing myself. And this, whatever it was, felt like the beginning of something deeper than I had expected. It was a Saturday afternoon when I received the next text from Sarah. "Hey, I was thinking about going to that cafe you mentioned the other day. Want to join me?" The invitation was simple, nothing extravagant, yet the butterflies in my stomach told me that it meant more. It was casual on the surface, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were edging closer to something neither of us knew how to define. But like the last time, I agreed quickly. "I'd love to," I replied. "What time?" She answered almost immediately. "How about 2? I'll meet you there." The rest of the day passed slowly, each minute feeling like a drawn-out stretch of anticipation. As much as I tried to focus on other things, my mind kept wandering back to Sarah and our strange, unspoken connection. It was as though we were both tiptoeing around the truth of what was happening, unsure whether to plunge forward or stay in the safe zone where everything was still easy and undefined. When I walked into the cafe at exactly 2:00 p.m., I spotted Sarah immediately. She was sitting by the window, her back to the street, the sunlight filtering through the trees outside, casting a soft glow on her face. She was reading a book, but the moment she noticed me, her face lit up, and the book was pushed aside, as if it were an afterthought. "Hey," she greeted, her smile wide and easy, and I couldn't help but notice how at home she seemed here. It was a cozy place, with mismatched chairs and plants on every surface, but it felt like it matched her perfectly, warm, inviting, and full of life. "Hey," I said, smiling back, though a part of me still felt the knot of uncertainty in my stomach. I hadn't seen her since dinner, and I wasn't sure what to expect now. We exchanged pleasantries as I sat down, but there was a different energy between us today. It wasn't quite as relaxed as before. There was a nervous edge to our conversation, a hesitancy in the way we looked at each other. Neither of us was sure how to navigate this new dynamic, and it showed. "So," I said, after a few moments of awkward silence, "how's work been?" "Busy." "Always," she answered with a slight chuckle. "But I'm managing. You know how it goes. Just trying to keep my head above water most days." "I hear that," I said, nodding. "I feel like I'm always on the edge of drowning in emails and deadlines, but I'm getting the hang of it." There was a slight pause, and I could tell we were both aware of the subtle shift in the air. It wasn't just small talk anymore. The more we spoke, the more I realized that neither of us was quite sure how to address the elephant in the room. The fact that something had changed between us, but we hadn't figured out what to do with it yet. "So, what have you been up to other than work?" I asked, trying to steer the conversation back to something less loaded. Sarah hesitated for a moment, her fingers tracing the edge of her cup. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice softer now, almost like she was unsure of where she was going with it. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about what's been happening between us." My heart skipped a beat, and I suddenly felt like I couldn't breathe. She was thinking about it too. This thing between us, this undefined, messy feeling. I wasn't sure what to say, but I couldn't ignore the truth anymore. I wanted to explore whatever this was, whatever we were. But I was also afraid of ruining the fragile connection we had by rushing into something neither of us was ready for. "I've been thinking about it too," I confessed, my voice betraying the vulnerability I felt. "I didn't expect this, whatever this is, but I can't stop thinking about you, about us." There was a long pause, and I watched Sarah's face soften as she took a deep breath. For a moment, she looked as if she were weighing her words carefully, unsure of how to respond. The tension between us grew, and I could feel the weight of the conversation starting to sink in. "I don't know what this is either," she said finally, her voice almost a whisper. "I don't want to rush anything, but at the same time, I feel like we're not being honest with each other. I don't want to play games, and I don't want to keep pretending that we don't have this connection." Her words were like a confession, a release of all the unspoken things that had been building between us. She didn't want to play it safe anymore. She wanted to see where this could go, to take that leap into the unknown, just like I did. I agree, I said, my heart pounding in my chest. I don't want to pretend anymore either. I think there's something real here, something worth exploring. We both fell silent for a moment, as if the weight of our words had finally landed. I didn't know where this was going, but it felt like we were finally facing the truth of the situation. Whatever this was, it was more than just a passing moment. And that thought both scared and exhilarated me. I'm glad we talked about this, Sarah said softly, breaking the silence. I think we both needed to hear it. And maybe now we can stop pretending that we're just neighbors. I nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was on the same page as someone else, someone who shared my uncertainty and my desire to understand where this connection might lead. Well, I said with a smile, I'm glad we're on the same page. We finished our coffee, the conversation lighter now, but still tinged with the deeper understanding we had just shared. And as we stood to leave, I couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, I was looking forward to it. We walked out of the cafe together, our paths aligned, but the weight of what was coming next hung in the air between us. There was no turning back now. Whatever this was, whatever we were, it had to be explored. The defining moment. The days after our coffee at the cafe passed in a blur. The conversation Sarah and I had was still fresh in my mind, lingering in the back of my thoughts like a soft melody. We had talked about what we both wanted, the hesitation we felt about rushing into something too quickly. But at the same time, there was an undeniable pull between us, a force that neither of us could ignore. It was clear now, this wasn't just casual anymore. Whatever this connection was, it was real. But reality had a way of complicating things. I had always been a bit of a loner, and the idea of letting someone into my life like this, of allowing myself to be vulnerable, to feel things I hadn't felt in years, was both exhilarating and terrifying. I was afraid of opening up, of letting myself fall too fast and too hard, only to be hurt again. The idea of putting myself in a position where I could get emotionally attached was daunting. Yet, when I was with Sarah, I couldn't help but feel like the world was a little less intimidating. She had a way of making everything seem possible, even the things that terrified me. The week after our cafe meeting was a mixture of anticipation and uncertainty. Sarah and I had been texting here and there, but there was this unspoken rule between us. We were both taking it slow. Neither of us wanted to force anything, but neither of us could ignore the chemistry that sparked whenever we were near each other. On Thursday evening, after a long day at work, I received a message from Sarah that caught me off guard. It wasn't a casual text like the ones we had been exchanging. It was an invitation, but it felt different this time. More serious, almost as if she was trying to communicate something important. Hey, I was wondering if you'd like to come over tonight, she texted. I've been thinking a lot about everything we talked about, and I think I'm ready for us to have a real conversation about what this is, about us. I stared at the message for a long time, my heart suddenly beating faster. A real conversation. I knew what she meant. We had danced around our feelings for so long, kept our thoughts carefully guarded, afraid of what might happen if we let down our walls. But now it felt like she was ready to face the truth, to finally take that step forward. I didn't hesitate. I knew this was something I needed to do, something I wanted to do. I typed a response, my fingers slightly trembling. I'd love to. I'll be there at 7. The anticipation that had been building up inside me over the last week was now a living, breathing thing. It felt like I was walking towards something monumental, something that could change everything. And for the first time, I felt ready for it. I arrived at Sarah's apartment just as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the street. The cool evening air brushed against my face, and I could feel my nerves creeping back in. I knocked on her door, and when she opened it, I was met with a soft smile. a smile that, in that moment, seemed to hold more than just casual friendliness. There was warmth in her eyes, something deeper that made my heart skip a beat. "Hey, come in," she greeted me, stepping aside to let me enter. Her apartment felt even cozier than usual, with soft lighting and the faint smell of something savory wafting from the kitchen. It was comforting, familiar, and yet tonight, it felt like there was more at stake. "Dinner smells amazing," I said, trying to keep things light, though my nerves were making it hard to focus on anything other than her. She smiled softly and led me to the dining table. The setup was intimate, with candles flickering on the table, a bottle of wine open and ready to be poured. There was no mistaking it now. This wasn't just another casual evening. This was different. "I thought we could talk," she said as she poured the wine. "Really talk? I don't want us to keep dancing around the truth anymore. We need to figure out what we're doing here." Her words hit me like a wave, and for a moment, I was silent. This was it, the conversation we'd been avoiding, the one where we would finally acknowledge that something had shifted between us. The tension was palpable, and I could feel it building in the space between us. "Yeah," I finally said, my voice low. "I think it's time we had that conversation too." We sat down, and for a while, the conversation was light, just like it always had been. We spoke about small things, what we had been up to, how our work was going, how we had both been feeling the weight of the busy week. But as the evening wore on, I could sense a shift. Our words became more deliberate, more meaningful. It was as though we were both testing the waters, trying to see how much we were willing to admit to each other. Eventually, Sarah set her fork down and looked at me with a seriousness that made my heart race. "I've been thinking about this a lot," she said, her voice quieter now, almost hesitant. "And I don't want to hide anymore. I don't want to pretend that we're just two neighbors who occasionally chat. There's something real here, and I think we both know it." I could feel my chest tighten. She was right. There was something between us, something undeniable. And though I was scared of what it could mean, I couldn't deny it any longer. "I've been feeling the same way," I said, meeting her gaze. "I didn't expect this. I thought it was just a friendly connection at first. But now I can't help but feel like there's something more. And I think I'd want to explore it. I want to see where this goes." For a moment, there was nothing but silence. The weight of our words hung in the air between us. It was like we were both holding our breath, waiting for something to happen, for the other shoe to drop. But nothing came. We just sat there, the tension between us growing, and I realized that this was the moment. The moment when everything could either fall apart or come together. Finally, Sarah spoke again, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm scared, you know. I'm scared of what this could be. I don't want to get hurt, but I also don't want to miss out on something that could be really good." Her honesty hit me like a punch to the gut. I had been feeling the same way, scared, uncertain, but hearing her say it aloud made me realize that maybe we were both in the same place. Maybe this fear we were feeling was just part of the process, part of the journey. "I'm scared too," I confessed, leaning forward, my voice steady. "But I think I'd rather take the risk than live wondering what might have been." She smiled softly, and for the first time that evening, the weight of uncertainty seemed to lift just a little. "I think you're right," she said, her voice full of hope. "Let's take this slow, but let's see where it goes, together." And in that moment, I realized something. I didn't need all the answers. I didn't need everything to be perfect right now. All I needed was the chance to be with her, to explore whatever this was without the pressure of having it figured out. Slowly, I reached across the table and took her hand in mine. She didn't pull away. Instead, she squeezed my hand, and I knew that we were both ready to take that first step into the unknown together. The night stretched on, and as we finished our dinner, the conversation became more relaxed. The fear that had once held us back seemed to dissipate, replaced by a growing sense of possibility. Whatever was between us, whatever we were about to create, It was going to be something worth exploring, and for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to embrace it. A new beginning. In the weeks that followed our conversation, it felt like Sarah and I had entered a new chapter of our lives. We had talked, really talked, about where we were headed, what we wanted, and the uncertainties that had been holding us back. It was as if the weight of all the unspoken things between us had finally been lifted, allowing us to move forward in a way that felt natural, yet entirely new. The initial awkwardness that had been a constant companion in the early days of our connection gradually faded, replaced by a sense of comfort I hadn't expected. Every time we saw each other, whether it was a passing hello in the hallway, a quick text to check in, or a longer conversation over coffee, it felt more meaningful. We were no longer just neighbors. We were two people exploring something real, something that could grow into something more. I found myself looking forward to our interactions in a way I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just about seeing her, though I couldn't deny the spark that still flickered in my chest whenever our eyes met. It was the way she made me feel, like I wasn't alone, like I mattered in a way that went beyond small talk and casual pleasantries. Sarah had become someone I could be myself around, someone who made the world feel a little less overwhelming. And that realization was both comforting and terrifying. It was a vulnerability I hadn't let myself experience in a long time, and I wasn't sure what to do with it. But what I did know was this. I didn't want to pull away. I wanted to see where this could go, even if it meant facing the uncertainty that came with it. I wanted to take the leap with Sarah and see if we could build something meaningful together, something lasting. One Friday afternoon, after another exhausting week at work, I found myself staring at my phone, scrolling through the contacts list, trying to muster the courage to text Sarah. We had talked about getting together sometime soon, but I had been holding back, unsure of how to take the next step. There was still that small voice in my head questioning whether I was moving too fast, but another part of me, one that I hadn't heard in a while, was telling me to stop overthinking it. So, I sent the text. Hey, how about we grab dinner tonight? I know this great place I've been wanting to try. I promise it's not a cheesy date spot. I smiled as I hit send, but my stomach was tight with nerves. I had always been a bit of a planner, someone who liked to think through every detail before taking action. But with Sarah, I felt like I was throwing caution to the wind. She had this way of making everything feel more spontaneous, like it was okay to let go of control and just see where things took us. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed with a reply. Dinner sounds great. I'm free at 7. Where should we meet? My heart soared as I read her message. The simple invitation, so casual, yet filled with promise, made everything feel real. We weren't just two people awkwardly trying to figure things out anymore. We were actively choosing to spend time together, to explore whatever this was between us. As I drove to the restaurant that evening, I couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement bubbling inside me. This was different. The anticipation in the air wasn't just about the meal or the location. It was about what was happening between us. It was as though we were both testing the waters, dipping our toes into something new, but both of us were willing to take the plunge. I arrived at the restaurant a little early, giving myself a moment to calm my nerves before Sarah arrived. The place was quiet, the dim lighting casting a soft glow over the tables. The low hum of conversations and the clinking of silverware created an atmosphere that felt intimate, and I couldn't help but think that it was the perfect setting for what I hoped would be a memorable evening. When Sarah walked through the door, my heart skipped a beat. She was wearing a simple yet elegant dress, her hair pulled back in a loose bun that framed her face perfectly. There was a natural beauty to her that took my breath away. But it wasn't just her appearance. It was the way she moved, the way she smiled when she saw me, as if there was a silent understanding between us, a connection that only we shared. Hey, she said, her voice light and warm, as she walked up to the table. You look nice. You too, I replied, standing up to pull out the chair for her. She sat down, and the conversation flowed easily as we settled into the rhythm of the evening. We talked about the food, about our day, about everything and nothing at all. There was no tension, no forced small talk. It felt easy, like we had been doing this for much longer than we had. And it was in that ease, in that comfort, that I realized how much I had come to rely on her presence in my life. As the meal continued, I could feel the connection between us growing. It wasn't just about the casual conversations or the gentle teasing. It was about the way we could speak without words, the way we could communicate 1,000 things with a single glance. There was a mutual understanding, a silent agreement that whatever this was, whatever we were, it was something worth exploring, something worth fighting for. After dinner, we decided to take a walk around the city. The night air was cool, and the streets were quieter than usual, with the lights of the city casting a golden glow over everything. As we walked side by side, I couldn't help but notice how natural it felt to have her by my side. Our hands brushed occasionally, but neither of us made a move to close the distance. It was as if we were both savoring the moment, waiting for the right time to take the next step. We ended up at a small park near the restaurant, the benches empty and the trees swaying gently in the breeze. The world felt distant, as if it were just the two of us in that quiet, intimate space. "I'm really glad we did this," Sarah said, breaking the silence. "I've been thinking a lot about everything. About us." I turned to look at her, my heart racing. "Yeah, me too. I've been thinking a lot about it too." There was a pause, and for a moment, I wasn't sure what to say. I wanted to tell her how much I appreciated her, how much I valued the connection we had. But the words felt too small for what I was feeling. Finally, Sarah spoke again, her voice softer this time. "I think I'm ready to take the next step," she said, her eyes meeting mine with a seriousness I hadn't seen before. "I'm not sure where this is going, but I know I want to find out. I want to see what this could be, see where it goes together." I felt my chest tighten at her words, and a wave of relief washed over me. She was saying what I had been too afraid to say aloud. We were on the same page. We didn't need to have all the answers right now. We just needed to be honest with each other, to trust in the process, and take it one step at a time. "I feel the same way," I said, my voice steady despite the rush of emotions I was feeling. "I want to see where this goes too, together." And just like that, it felt like the last piece of the puzzle had fallen into place. We didn't need to rush or have everything figured out. All we needed was the willingness to try, to be vulnerable with each other, and to let whatever this was unfold naturally. As we sat there, side by side, I realized that this was only the beginning. Whatever came next, whatever challenges or joys awaited us, I was ready for it. With Sarah by my side, I felt like we could face anything. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid. The road ahead, the days that followed our conversation felt different, lighter, yet filled with a quiet anticipation. The shift between Sarah and me was unmistakable. The barriers that had once kept us at arm's length, the walls built up by hesitation and uncertainty, were slowly coming down. What had begun as a simple connection between neighbors was now becoming something deeper, something real. And it wasn't about the grand gestures or the overwhelming moments. It was the small, everyday things that made me realize just how much I was invested in this. There were no more games, no more wondering whether or not we were on the same page. Sarah and I had both taken that step, and now it felt like we were just figuring things out together, learning what it meant to build something meaningful from the ground up. It was still new and uncertain, but it was ours. We didn't have all the answers, but that felt okay. It wasn't about knowing everything. It was about being present, being open to whatever came next. Every day the relationship seemed to deepen. Our conversations grew more personal, more genuine. We shared our dreams, our fears, the little things that made us who we were. I found myself telling Sarah things I hadn't shared with anyone in years. The way my parents' divorce had shaped my view of relationships, how much I feared letting people get too close, and the overwhelming loneliness I had felt when I first moved into the city. Sarah, in turn, told me about the struggles she'd faced growing up, how she had always been independent, but how, underneath it all, she had longed for connection. It was clear that we both had our own scars, our own stories, but in each other, we found someone who understood, not because they had the same experiences, but because we had created a space where honesty was the foundation. We began spending more time together. It wasn't just about dinners anymore, though those still became a regular occurrence. We found ourselves doing simple things like grocery shopping together or taking long walks around the neighborhood, talking about everything and nothing. It felt natural, comfortable, like we were building our own little world. And there were moments when I would catch myself staring at her, whether it was as we laughed over something silly or when she spoke passionately about something she cared about. And I realized that I was falling for her in a way I hadn't expected. It wasn't a sudden, overwhelming rush of emotion. It was slow and steady, like a river carving its way through rock, making its mark over time. I didn't know where this was going, but I couldn't imagine my life without her in it. But with every step forward, there were moments of doubt, too. I had been hurt before, and the fear of repeating past mistakes often crept into my mind. I had spent so much of my life protecting myself, keeping people at a distance, but now, with Sarah, I was learning how to let go. There were times when I found myself holding back, questioning if I was doing the right thing, if I was really ready to give this all of myself. I had never been the type to open up fully, to let someone see me in my entirety. But with Sarah, I found that I didn't want to hold back. I wanted to share everything, to be completely honest, and to see if we could truly build something together. One evening, after we had spent the afternoon in the park, walking hand in hand as the sun set behind us, I found myself at a crossroads. We were sitting on a bench, the evening air cool against our skin, and I couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. It was as if the next step was looming over us, something we both knew was coming but hadn't quite prepared for. It wasn't a sudden realization, but more of a quiet understanding. We were no longer just casually getting to know each other. We were stepping into something that could become permanent, and that realization was both thrilling and terrifying. Sarah turned to me, her expression serious. "I've been thinking a lot lately," she said, her voice soft, as if weighing every word. "About us, about where this is going. And I think I'm ready for something more. I want to know if we can really make this work. I'm not asking for any big promises right now, but I want us to take that next step together." My heart raced as I heard her words. It wasn't a question of whether I wanted the same thing. It was clear that I did. But it was the weight of the decision that gave me pause. We had been moving steadily forward, but now, we were at the point where we had to decide what we were building together. This wasn't just a fling, a short-lived connection. It was something real, something worth investing in. And I wanted it. I wanted her. I had already started imagining a future with Sarah in it, a future where we weren't just neighbors who happened to meet by chance, but partners who had built something meaningful from the ground up. "I want that too," I replied, my voice steady despite the emotions running through me. "I've been thinking the same thing. I'm not sure where this is going, but I know that I don't want to lose you. I want to take that next step. I think we can make this work. We've already built so much, and I don't want to stop now." She smiled, and the look in her eyes made my heart swell. It wasn't a grand, sweeping declaration, but something more profound, something quiet and genuine. We both understood what was at stake. This was no longer just a series of fun dates or simple moments of connection. We were making a choice, a decision to build something real. And that commitment, even without the certainty of what lay ahead, was enough for both of us. As we sat there, the world around us fading away, I realized that what we were doing was the beginning of something truly beautiful. It wasn't about perfection, about having all the answers. It was about the willingness to embrace uncertainty, to take risks and trust that together we could navigate whatever came our way. From that night on, everything felt different. We began talking more about our future, about the things we wanted to do together, the places we wanted to visit, and the dreams we wanted to chase. We still had our doubts, our fears, but they no longer overshadowed what we had. Instead, they became part of the journey, part of the story we were writing together. There were moments when the fear crept in again, when I questioned whether I was doing the right thing, but those moments were fewer and farther between. The more time I spent with Sarah, the more I realized that we were building something that had the potential to last, something strong enough to withstand the challenges life would throw our way. It wasn't always easy. We had our disagreements, our moments of doubt, but every challenge we faced only brought us closer. I learned to trust her, to open up, and to embrace the vulnerability that came with allowing someone into my life in such a profound way. And in turn, she learned to trust me, to let me in, and to share the parts of herself that she had kept hidden for so long. As we walked through the rest of the year together, I couldn't help but feel grateful for that fateful Tuesday when I had knocked on Sarah's door to drop off a package. That simple act, that one moment, had led us here, to a place where we were no longer just two neighbors, but two people who had found something extraordinary in each other. And as we continued to build our lives together, I couldn't wait to see where the road would take us next.